Excuse me. 1 in 100 Detroiters has the edge of dread. 1 in 100 Detroiters gets stretch discounts on albums, clothes, concert tickets, sports, movies, and even food. Now Dread through WRF presents the Gold Card, worth even more discounts at stores all over Detroit. Trade in your old card for gold.
Do you remember the first time you stepped into an arena to witness a collision of good versus evil? The excitement in the air, the roar of the crowd, and of course, the blood. It's time to relive those memories big time. A historical wrestling lesson taught by your professors, the legendary Terry Sullivan and Supermouth Dave Drason. Rocks TV and International Big Time Wrestling present Big Time Memories.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Big Time Memories. Terry Sullivan, Dave Drason, and today we're going to continue to speak about one of the greatest all-time wrestlers, the world's most dangerous wrestler himself, Mr. William Fritz Afflis. And you're saying, who? Better known as that guy, Dick the Bruiser. This is the second part. There's just so much about Bruiser, obviously, not just because of the length of his career, but because of all the things he accomplished as being one of the legit, top, elite professional wrestlers of all time.
Oh, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And just to recap a little bit, he grew up in, Lafayette, Indiana, and his mother was into politics, and, he got kicked off the Purdue football team for hitting the coach with his helmet.
To that well
and didn't play he transferred to the University of Nevada, never played another football game, but still made it into the National Football League.
Well, he went to Nevada, and then the school dropped football.
Yeah,
right?
The year after he gets there, and then, I
can tell you that during his rookie year, he was working for one of the men who was in charge of network television. Back in the day when we only had 3 or 4 channels on the television, professional wrestling was sort of a constant on at least one of the network channels. So now you're getting nationwide, if not regional, exposure to some of these guys. Mm-hmm. During Bruiser's rookie year, he worked for Fred Kohler, who was the promoter in Chicago, and supplied talent for Detroit, Cincinnati, all throughout other areas of Michigan and other states as well. But Kohler had the network TV on the Dumont Network out of Chicago, and so Bruiser became one of the stars there. So now people all around the country are seeing him, and they want him to wrestle. Promoters want him to wrestle on their cards. And, of course, his asking price is just astronomical, as well it should be at that point in time.
Yeah, we brought up the point that, he made his debut at the Olympia Stadium, I think it was in 1959, and he headlined the next 39 out of 41 shows there.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
And then the incident that a lot of people talk about, Bruiser was banned for life from New York State or Madison Square Garden. No, wasn't true. We told you all about that. Bruiser came back several times after the event that we're talking about. The event was a riot. The Bruiser basically was responsible for, it was a tag team match with Edward Carpentier and Argentina Rocca against Dr. Jerry Graham.
No, with Dr. Jerry Graham.
Bruiser and
Dr. Jerry Graham.
Yeah, against Rocca and Carpentier. Yeah. And a little riot after that, and a lot of people got hurt, and thousands of chairs got destroyed. And but they say Bruiser was banned for life. He wasn't, although the rule that was instituted legit children under 14 were not allowed to attend events at Madison Square Garden.
For many years.
30 years, after that,
And the incident in Detroit that we brought up at the, big fight, with him and Alex Karras at the Lindell AC and, the commission, Michigan State Athletic Commission, Charles Davey chairman, really banned him, so he was banned from Detroit.
Cost him $50,000 to get back in.
Yep. But he still had his, Indianapolis WWA promotion, and things were going, gravy for him.
Yeah.
And that's a recap of last week's show, and brought you back up to date. And we left the show, and I said, Dick the Bruiser, who started, a lot of guys, gave him a lot of, time to develop their characters, stuff like that, work his promotion. But probably the biggest name of all, to me, good friend, loved the guy, people hated him, but then people loved him many years later, Bobby Heenan.
Oh, that's who you're talking about?
Yeah. Bobby Heenan started for the Bruisers promotion at a young age, probably like 13, 14, I would say. He was, selling Cokes and popcorn, and he was taking the ring jackets back to the dressing room for him. So, he had a little bit of an in there. And somehow he wanted to become a manager, and Dick the Bruiser gave him the chance. And I think his first foray in it, didn't he manage Angelo Poffo and Chris Markoff?
The Devil's Duo.
Right.
Right.
And then he went on to manage the Assassins?
Assassins, Tommaso and Guy Mitchell, the Stomper.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, Bobby worked for him for many years,
Yeah.
And as Bobby tells the story, he was abused by him, and many times. Bruiser, a lot of times Bruiser, took liberties with a lot of people.
Yeah, including our
good friend,
world-renowned New York Raymond.
Raymond Selby.
Yeah. New York Raymond worked for Bruiser. New York was a manager. And he was basically comic relief for Dick the Bruiser. And Bruiser, like you say, would abuse him. But Raymond was known as Captain Willie. There's some video out there on YouTube with Captain Willie with the Assassins and then Captain Willie with Bruiser. But the story that a lot of people like to tell is the time that Bruiser took a rope and tied up New York Raymond and threw him in the swimming pool.
Yeah, left him for dead. And then wasn't it Guy Mitchell?
It was Guy Mitchell who eventually the people thought, this is Dick. This is no longer a joke. Dick, you need to get him out of there. And Dick was just sitting there, probably puffing his guitar, cigar.
Puffing his guitar. What have you been smoking that
ain't
during?
Smoking guitars?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. New York Raymond.
Guy Mitchell finally got New York Raymond out so he could live to sell body presses for years in memoriam.
Yep. And, we brought up on the last show that Dick the Bruiser, tried to run against the Sheik promotion in 1965, filming TV at the Leland Hotel in downtown Detroit, and he ran shows through March, April, and May. So that only lasted 3 months. But let's bring up the biggest challenge. It was in 1971 that Dick the Bruiser went to the Michigan State Athletic Commission and, asking to get, a promoter's license back. But he was still banned from, the police officers and lawsuits that he had against them. But I guess he ended up settling the police lawsuits. And then he got his promotion license, and he was going to promote at the Olympia once again with Lincoln Cavallari and
Lou Marutis.
Lou Marutis, exactly. So that first show that he was going to have happened on October 23rd, 1971. And that's a memorable one for me because it was only not even my first year working for the Sheik's Bigtime Wrestling as their photographer. And a lot of my good friends were on the show. You know, Baron von Raschke, Bobby Heenan, Blackjack Lanza, and it's like, oh my God, there's some way I've got to go see my friends at this show. And it was a historic thing. Dick the Bruiser coming back to Detroit.
Yeah.
You know, he was had TV on Channel 9. You know, CKLW out of Windsor. And, you know, they were making a big, you know, thing for, you know, his return.
Yeah.
And in return, you know, we know what happened. The Sheiks, you know, brought in a lot of the NWA promoters' talent, you know, from all over the country and, you know, going to go head to head. Let's go at it. You know, and Bruiser, you know, had his first show. Drew, okay, I guess. I guess he had maybe 5,000, 6,000. You know, it was not bad there.
Yeah.
You know, I think he went against Baron von Raschke for the title. I think Raschke had the title at that time, and Bruiser ended up winning the title.
So he's drawn 5,000 at Olympia. Meanwhile, across town is probably 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, up until, you know, we had that big run of, you know, how many sellouts in a row.
7 consecutive sellouts, yeah.
Boy, I remember those days.
Oh,
God,
yeah.
they were great. You know, so I did, you know, I ended up going to that first Bruiser show. You know, I talked to Lou Marutis and stuff, and he gave me a press pass, and I went there and, you know, took photographs up at the ring. But unbeknownst to them, I was also sort of like a spy for Sheik. you know, hey, you know, tell us, you know, how many people are there. Let us know, you know, what this and that and the other. So, you know, with his blessing, I went there, you know, for that initial show, and that's the only show I ever went to there for them. But, you know, he lasted almost, you know,
few years.
2.5, 3 years there. You know,
I think they beat Big Time Wrestling at least once, maybe twice, but not on a regular basis.
No, maybe one time that they did beat him. Remember, I think there was a, you know, because the Sheik was running weekly at that time,
Yeah.
and he would make sure that he ran against, you know, the Bruiser show. And I think just because, you know, I'll say like a year prior, you had to book Kobo. So the Sheik would book every 2 weeks. So he had those dates locked up. And when Bruiser would run a show on one of the nights that the Sheik wasn't running, well, Sheik would, you know, ask Kobo, you know, is this date open? And he always ran against him. If he didn't get Kobo, he ran against him at the State Fairgrounds. And I remember one time in Cobo Hall, the Hall B show, you know, and that may have been one show that he outdrew, you know, the Sheik on. Because, you know, the Hall B, it was, you know, like a flat floor. There was no risers, no anything. It's like all the seats were set up on the flat floor. So if you were back in row, you know, triple Z, you know, you had, you know, Andre the Giant looked like, you know, you know, Sky Low Low from as far back as you were. But, and that, you know, like I said, his promotion at the Olympia lasted, you know, up until February 22nd, 1974 was his last show at the Olympia. And it was, you know, Dick the Bruiser, I think Bruiser and the Crusher went against Cowboy. No, Dick the Bruiser and Cowboy Bob Ellis went against the Valiants. Oh. That was the last, you know, show.
Yeah, Crusher didn't come in that much, did he?
No, he came in later, you know, once the things got rolling. I know Crusher came in. Bruno Sammartino came in.
Sure, and that was a big help.
Oh, well, God, when he was working with the Crusher, that was always fun because, you know, the drinking beer and dancing with the dollies.
Yeah. But, you know, one thing that always interested me is the Sheik got help from all the fellow NWA promoters and would stack the card with all these huge stars from other territories. But didn't seem to happen that much with Bruiser specifically. Where was Verne Gagne?
Yeah.
You know, where was Bockwinkel? You know,
well, they had their own territory, so they were running.
So did these other NWA guys.
Well, that was the thing on the Bruisers shows. They had the same talent almost, you know, for the longest time. And, you know, the only, you know, changes were when they brought in the Crusher and maybe Bruno. You know, that's the only, you know, changes that they had. You know, but then, you know, somehow, you know, Bruiser, you know, accepted defeat, you know, somehow I wasn't there. Do you have any information on how they settled?
No, other than part of the settlement was the Sheik would run some shows at Olympia.
Yeah.
Maybe it was to finish out whatever Bruiser had already contracted for. But other than that, it was just the Sheik would do Sheik against Bruiser matches in Detroit, and Sheik would go to Indianapolis and wrestle Bruiser there. He also wrestled him in Fort Wayne, another Bruiser city, but that was it. I think they each went back and forth, 3 or 4 matches maybe in each place.
Yeah. Well, I think the first one, when they built up the Dick the Bruiser versus the Sheik, I think that was in August of '74, that they had that one, and it didn't sell out.
No.
You would think Sheik versus Dick the Bruiser, boy, that hasn't happened in how many years in Detroit?
That's what they were thinking.
Yeah. But I think it was because of the Olympia itself. In a bad neighborhood, back at that time, even though they had plenty of free lighted parking in the back, it's like, the security in that parking lot wasn't too good either.
And people drive by and say, oh, free cars, let's go take one.
Yeah. So, they, had their, couple bouts at Cobo, and then they had the cage match there, and, they drew good at Cobo.
They drew well,
yeah,
but nowhere near what they expected to.
No, not at all. But the one thing is when Dick the Bruiser had his promotion, rival promotion going in Detroit, Sam Muchnick in St. Louis, who Bruiser was on all his shows all the time, a lot of times in the main events or semi-main event, Sam Muchnick being NWA member, banned Bruiser from working in St. Louis.
Not willingly.
Not willingly, yeah, because, Bruiser was money to him there.
Yeah.
And they were good friends, too.
Oh, sure, yeah. Bruiser had an enormously successful run in St. Louis for years and years, if not a couple of decades.
Yep.
He was in and out of the main events. The people really believed in him there.
Yeah.
He was the enforcer. He was going to get it done.
Yeah, and I don't think people in St. Louis really knew why Bruiser wasn't coming to the,
Probably
on the
not.
cards anymore.
No.
But, after, they settled, Sheik and Bruiser settled their difference, he was back and working in St. Louis again. Mm-hmm. When Bruiser had his promotion in based out of Indianapolis anyway, there was a guy who had a local TV show, local talk show, and people know him from other things now, but David Letterman.
Oh, yeah.
Had a independent little TV show in 1980 in Indianapolis.
It was that one was NBC.
Yeah.
He was on the network.
Yeah.
It was a morning show.
Right, exactly.
Stiffed.
Yep. And, he liked wrestling, and Dick the Bruiser being local, he brought Dick the Bruiser in on his TV show.
Yeah.
And he was so impressed with the Bruiser that he named Paul Schaefer and the band the world's most dangerous band after Dick the Bruiser,
sure.
The world's most dangerous wrestler.
Yeah.
And, God, he, starting, in the 50s, he just had such a great career, everywhere he went. He was champion in Detroit and Indianapolis, of course. His, big, run in L.A., Japan. Mercy's sake, he, worked Japan, him and the Crusher, riots, but a riot in Japan is like people, standing up and say, hey, that's a riot. Because people in Japan at their shows, they were very polite. If they liked something in the ring, they'd applaud. Mm-hmm. They, weren't getting up and, yelling and screaming. That just wasn't, their thing. No. But with Dick the Bruiser there, he's brawling outside the ring and stuff, fans just sitting there, patiently watching it. And, and that would have been, a start of a riot anywhere in the country here.
Yeah.
And he retired February 25th, 1989. In Muncie, Indiana, he had his last match against the Golden Lion.
Oh.
Now, I think the Golden Lion wasn't that to be his future son-in-law. I think his name was Tim
Replogle.
Yeah.
Replogle.
Yeah,
He was the Golden Lion. Yeah, I think he was one of the sons-in-laws.
Yeah. But, so the Golden Lion.
And he's the guy today,
Now-
even, who's Dick the Bruiser Jr.
Dick the Bruiser Jr.,
Yeah. Guy's
good
90,
guy.
and he's still
Good guy,
Dick the
though.
Bruiser.
Yeah. But Dick the Bruiser also had a son, Carl,
Right, yeah.
who wrestled.
As
Leroy Redbone. I thought, boy, you could have come up with a better name, because when I saw that name and, his son wrestling, I immediately thought of Leon Redbone.
Yeah,
the
exactly,
one-hit
yeah.
Wasn't he a one-hit wonder?
oh no, he was around for quite a while. He
Come and
did a
get your
lot.
nub or something like that. It is one song.
But and Leroy didn't look a thing like Bruiser.
No.
Didn't look like him at all.
Yeah, and we're talking about, Dick the Bruiser Jr., Tim Replogle, but also Dick the Bruiser's son-in-laws, Spike Huber.
Right.
Really good guy. What a great worker he was. And then Scott Romer.
Yep.
Scott Romer, he worked as a manager. Saul Creechman, was it?
Yep.
Yeah. No relation or anything, to Eddie Creechman,
No.
who managed the Sheik and, Abdullah the Butcher and so many others. But, 3 wrestling, related son-in-laws for Dick the Bruiser.
Cuts the talent fees quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, if they got any payoffs.
That's right.
Yeah. But then I remember in 1982, we had our WFIA convention in Indianapolis.
Oh.
With Dick the Bruisers, he welcomed us there, gave us, access to his talent and stuff. And it's like he showed up to our banquet. Him, Guy Mitchell was there. I think Frankie Lane was there. Who was the one guy? Bob Boyer.
Oh yeah.
Bob Boyer worked.
Eagle.
Bobby Bold Eagle,
Yeah.
he was there. A couple other guys too. But
Yeah.
at that convention, Dick the Bruiser was awarded Wrestler of the Year.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And prior, to the convention of that, I was there, because I was on the board of directors. Me, Don Wilson, and a few others. We get there earlier in the week to set things up and get things going. But Sam Muchnick was there, and we had to go to Dick the Bruiser's house. I guess Muchnick and him had to talk about something or other, and myself, Sam Muchnick, Don Wilson, Judy Wilson. We go to Bruiser's house. So we show up. And Dick the Bruiser's outside in his pool, so naked. he was swimming naked. So it's like, we walk in and it's like, us guys didn't care. Maybe Muchnick did, but Judy Wilson there. It's like, he grabbed a towel and put that around him. And it's like, then I hear from the roof, "Hey, Dave, how you doing?" It's like, doing work on Bruiser's roof. His son-in-law is Spike Huber.
Of course.
And I may have a picture, too, that I can share. I think I have a picture of him doing something up on the roof. I took a picture of him.
Well, the pool was basically the office during warmer weather. That's what I've heard from so many people, is that's where he would do business. He would plop there his cigars and his beer and Wilbur Snyder, and they'd do business.
Yeah. Well, he had the lounge chair and all that other kind of stuff back there, and he was always into tanning.
Yeah.
You got to maintain that tan.
Did he have a big house?
Not really. You would think that, for Dick the Bruiser and, all the money he had, it was a modest house.
Yeah.
But
he had a house in Florida, too, right?
Yeah.
So
but, modest house, a nice neighborhood and stuff like that. But I remember him, I don't remember, but I remember reading that, when Dick the Bruiser was a child, growing up, I can't remember. It might have been in Lafayette, Indiana, because his parents were, pretty well-to-do. They had the biggest house in the city.
Oh, wow.
So I can imagine, an old Victorian house that, he lived in, and when he was young. So, but it was nothing like the one he had in Indianapolis that I went to.
It was probably rarely there, so maybe.
But I
did.
I did see a couple of floating pennants and things like that. I think New York Raymond must have been in that pool at one time or another. But also, Dick the Bruiser related things. In Detroit, on WRIF radio, back in the 80s.
Baby.
It would have been, Arthur Penhallow.
Arthur P.
Yeah, but there was a guy, Jim Johnson had a partner, George Beyer, who was the comic, relief on the show. Yeah, the voice guy. And he did a Dick the Bruiser imitation. And it became really big. People just loved to, hear him on the radio anytime Dick the Bruiser, and he did comic stuff too, and made Bruiser look like an idiot sometimes,
sort
or
of.
a jokester, but it was really popular in Detroit, and everybody was imitating it, which I did too.
And they did commercials with the real Dick the Bruiser.
Exactly. And I have a picture of that, too. A poster that I still have with Dick the Bruiser promoting the WF. I think he had the WIF shirt on, and, he's posing. And I think I've got a picture of that to show you people. But he made his last in-ring appearance. Even though he retired, before in 1989. But his last in-ring appearance was on December 16th, 1990 in St. Louis at the Kiel Auditorium. And he was a referee in a match with Sting versus the Black Scorpion. Who, you didn't think, much of, who the Black Scorpion is. But it turned out that, Sting won the match and the Black Scorpion was unmasked. And it was Ric Flair. Oh. I was really shocked. I didn't know Ric Flair worked under a mask at any time. But also, Dick the Bruiser, in his hometown, just, he always gave back.
Yeah.
He was big with the kids. The kids.
Lots of hospital visits and things like that.
Yeah, he worked a lot of Shriner benefits, with the kids. And I remember, I think I might have a picture, too, of a bumper sticker that he'd always pass out, and you were a Bruiser buddy.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yep, the Bruiser buddy stickers.
Yeah.
And he ended up passing away, unfortunately, on November 10th, 1991. And I think he, died while working out.
Yeah, he was lifting weights.
And he ruptured a blood vessel or something in his
esophagus.
neck. Oh, yeah. And, great career and stuff, lasted till...
Well, Dave, you just when you think you've covered almost everything...
What?
Bruiser Bedlam.
Oh, my Lord, how could I forget that?
Many people have.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't involved in Bruiser Bedlam, but you were.
I was,
Tell us about...
And, there's another thing he did, too. Remember when he did co-commentary for Glow, the gorgeous ladies of wrestling, with David McLean?
See, and I first found out about the Bruiser Bedlam thing, and I was basically out of the business at that time. But they ran shows at the Premier Center in Sterling Heights, Michigan,
right?
And not too far because I was living in Sterling Heights at that time. But prior to Bruiser Bedlam coming in, Ricky Cortez was running shows at the Premier Center.
Oh, really?
And it was sort of how can we say run by. Mafia or mafioso or Castronosa or because Premier Center they had bring in Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, all these big name acts, and big name Dick the Bruiser, Bruiser Bedlam. Tell me about it.
Well, it was an idea that some people with money had to capitalize on Bruiser's fame in Detroit, not only from the WRIF exposure, but also from a few years before. It was about a dozen years had gone by, 10 years maybe, since Bruiser's last time in Detroit against the Sheik. And anyway, they wanted to do wrestling. They wanted wrestling for past TV. They wanted a wrestling show, and that wasn't a universally popular decision at PASS. Some of the people considered that wrestling was nowhere near a legitimate sport and it was very much beneath them. And for those of us on the front lines, at the Premier Center, that's pretty much the way we were treated by the lovely PASS staff.
Oh.
Not so much the camera people and the audio people, but the producers and the director and everything. And I can always remember one time, Bruiser and I were out getting ready to do the opening for a show, and I said, "What do you want, 30 or 60?" Meaning 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It was just a rundown of what was going to come up on that day's show, and we couldn't get an answer. And are you guys ready? Well, as soon as we find out if we're going to get if you want a 30 or a 60. And this went on for like 3 or 4 times, and I was starting to get hot. I really was. And I said to Bruiser, I said, "F this, let's go." And we walked off the set.
Wow. Now, I know you were the TV commentator for him, but even though it was called Bruiser Bedlam, Bruiser wasn't wrestling at that time.
Not on that program. They did not want him to wrestle because of his age. He was wrestling, though, in the places where that TV show aired, the regular, Detroit at the arena shots, the non-TV shots, okay. Toledo, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne. He was still wrestling. But after we walked off the set, you'd be amazed at how quickly they came up with, "Yeah, let's do a minute. Okay, thank you very much. Okay." Pretty simple, right?
So was Bruiser the promoter of Bruiser Bedlam?
Not
or
really,
he was
no.
just a name?
Just the name. The guy who was really doing the negotiation with PASS was Dr. Jerry Graham Jr.
Okay.
Jerry, Chris Carter, Gary Warrenchak were the ones who did most, if not all, of the legwork the day of, as well as leading up to the various shows.
Now, some of the guys that were on Bruiser Bedlam, I mean, they went on to great careers, but weren't the Steiner brothers?
Just Scotty. Scott was on very early in his career. Muhammad Jihad Saad, I mentioned. Chris Carter. We had Cowboy Rex Bodie. Cousin Junior, remember him from the WWE? Lanny Keene, he came in, nice guy. El Bracero was there, Fred Curry. Bobo Brazil showed up, but whoops, Bobo's too old. We don't want him to wrestle. Oh. So they had Bobo be a manager, and I don't think Bobo came back. Flying Fred Curry worked a shot or two. Sweet Daddy Malcolm Monroe, I don't remember if he was No Money or Sweet Daddy at that point in time, but he came in, and let's see, Terry Tyler and the Polynesian Wild Man and Prince Mama Mohammed. It was
Calypso Jim?
Calypso, sure, absolutely.
Or Bobo Brazil Jr., as he's known these days.
Yeah, he was there, and then several others. Yeah, it was a nice little promotion. Good bunch of guys.
Well, it's like, Bobo Brazil Jr. now. You had Dick the Bruiser Jr. now. Wouldn't it be great if somebody came out as the Sheik Jr.? Besides Eddie Jr. It's like, but yeah, wow. Dick the Bruiser, a legend.
People ask me about him all the time. What was he like? And, honest to gosh, even though you saw us together on television all the time, I rarely saw him other than when we were on camera. He came in, had his dressing room, and I didn't usually go back there because I just didn't get off hanging out in men's dressing rooms, so I'd stay sort of by myself, and okay, it's time to cut promos. All right, I'd come in one door, Bruiser'd come in the other, we'd do the thing, and away we'd go.
Wow.
Now, he was quite a piece of work as a commentator, a co-commentator. It was very difficult for me to get him to talk, and I don't discount the fact that maybe it was me. Maybe I wasn't feeding him the type of line or the type of a cue or whatever you might call it that gave him something to come back to me with. Because I would say, well, what do you think of that, Dick? And crickets.
Yeah, he wasn't that great at commentary.
Not that great, but he could be when he wanted to be. And as we went on, he got to loosen up a little bit, because I would every now and then, make fun of somebody or laugh at something, and then because he was all about playing it straight initially, but then he had his little pet things that he'd start to get, and he started to have a little more fun with it. So then, it got better. But one night, right in the middle of a show, they came out to me and said, "We're going to pull Bruiser off a commentary and put Chris Carter on." And I said, "No, you're not." I said, "Are you kidding me? This is Bruiser Bedlam. Dick the Bruiser is the reason, or a big reason, that people are watching the show. You are not pulling him off of this show, out of the middle of this show." And, the funny thing about it was, I had no power to do anything like that, but whoever I talked to believed it. Yeah. Went back to whoever told them, said, "No, Terry's not going for it."
Yeah, but you're
could have been a commentary-less show from the rest of that.
We really have to do one thing and give credit to gentleman Richard Vicek, Polish way, about his Dick the Bruiser book. I can't say enough about this book. It's a great read. It's short chapters, and it tells everything from his childhood to his mother, in politics, his, parents, his, where he grew up, where he went to school, just every detail about the life of Dick the Bruiser that we didn't tell is in this book. And you can get it through Crowbar Press, through my really good friend Scott Teal, who does great wrestling books.
The best.
Yeah. So if you can, pick up the Dick the Bruiser book, Crowbar Press, Scott Teal. You'll love it.
I've got one other thing to do with Bruiser Bedlam. The Free Press in Detroit printed an article just prior to Bruiser coming in talking about Bruiser Bedlam and the Premier Center, one thing or another. And they printed a caricature, a cartoon in the Free Press of Bruiser. And the tagline underneath the picture was talking about the fact that he has 4 dachshunds, doggies, 4 dachshunds. Their names were Duchess, Margaret Rose, his mother was Margaret, Spanky, and Bo Peep.
Yeah.
Those were Dick the Bruiser's puppy dogs, his dachshunds.
I forgot all about that when I was at the house. Those dogs were running around.
Really? Yeah.
But, boy, what a great episode.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Or 2-part episode, telling about Dick the Bruiser. And as customary, Terry, we need an outro. Your announcement on...
I don't know, the voice is a little rough today. I think you'd probably better be able to do this, take this one on your own.
You think I can handle this one?
I think you can handle it. He's your buddy.
Okay.
DTB.
Well, introducing from Reno, Nevada, weighing in at 275 pounds, he is the most dangerous wrestler in the world, Dick the Bruiser.